Hello, and thank you very much for coming along again for our ecological discussions this evening. This evening we want to look at the whole problem of knowledge systems and belief systems. It is quite a problem these days, the gap between what we know and what we believe, at least in public terms. We often think that we act on the basis of what we know. But in fact, we act more often on the basis of what we believe. And what we know and what we believe can be quite different, as we can see from something as important as the recent election. Knowledge systems are based on one set of things, and belief systems on another set of things altogether. And we need to keep that in mind, in effect. So we're going to look at climate change and the human prospect in terms of our survival in reference to knowledge, belief, and behavior. It's not automatic that knowing something means doing something. We can actually ask the question in terms of particular belief systems, like, what is the Episcopal view of our cosmic circumstance? Is this an absurd idea? Well, in a way it is, but not when you look at the way people are organized in terms of their belief systems on the Earth's surface. It is very meaningful for some people to say, well, listen, what does my church think about this, that, or the other thing? Others regard this as absurd and really want to get to the question, the central question, what is our cosmic circumstance? Not what's the Episcopal view on our cosmic circumstance, but stripping it of all the sort of sectarian flags that we can raise, what, in fact, is the cosmic view when we have no other place to stand? What is our understanding of our place in the universe? Well, this is often something that churches and religious traditions address themselves to, but it's not the same as saying that we know what's up. We need to, in effect, ask the question without the baggage of any particular tradition and ask, what is our cosmic circumstance? Well, this, in effect, can be done, and you can look at it in terms of different traditions and take a long-scale view at some of these things. I'll try to give you an idea of what this could be. If we look at the something like the 2010 hurricane season, for example, this has been mapped in detail and can be understood in terms of where these things occurred. That is, they occurred not just in sort of the United States or in a particular state within the United States. They have, in effect, traditions all over the Western Hemisphere and an understanding all over the Western Hemisphere because of what happened at the time. And we can actually find some of this, and thanks to the work of various people, including all of the scientific agencies in the U.S. government, we can map some of these kinds of things and get a sense of it from the different perspectives that they've been able to put together, and we can take a look at. Take a look at this one, for example, which is the hurricane season of 2010. We think we know what's going on. In fact, we get quite a view of it put together from time-lapse pictures from satellites. And we get a sense of things being pretty visible, and our circumstance in the cosmos can be understood to some extent by looking at these distant things. On the lower left, you'll see there are dates involved here, and this is the entire season from June through October. If we jump ahead on some of it, when some of the hurricanes start happening, you can see that they emerge here and we give them names, various things, as if we're controlling them because we give them names or something. There's something very primitive going on there. When we see something, if we name it, we think in some sense we understand it. Well, very few people understand hurricanes, and in any case, they don't control them. Here's Hurricane Igor, for example, and this is Hurricane Julia right here, right after it. These are two hurricanes that emerged during that year, and to some extent, we can ask ourselves, okay, from this viewpoint, what is it that it means to be involved at all in any kind of religious tradition? Because, in effect, we're not really asking the question from the point of view of any particular religious tradition. We're looking at it from outside the system in some sense. The same is true with the heating record. If you looked at the heating record, you'd probably be able to see the system over a period of time, and I'll try to call it up for you, in such a way that you can see what happened over the last 80 years or so, or even more than 80 years, the last 100 years or so, from the vantage point of, in effect, the composite run over a time-lapse period. And it's really quite instructive in a lot of ways. The problem is that very few of us can get this vantage point, and it's not easy to look at it, in effect. Let's take a look at it, though, because it's very riveting when it gets to looking at particular years. When you see these things in the year you were born and what's happened since, 15, 16, these are the years in the 20th century, 24, 26, 28, 30, 31, 32, you can see where the globe is heated up over time, and fixate on your birthday, the year in which you were born, and then think from then on in what's happened to the Earth's heat budget. You're located within a sequence of this, whether you like it or not, or whether you know it or not. These things have been mapped out now from the data collected all over the world in all of these climates over all of this period of time. And if you watch it, you can see that the world is heated up to 2012 when this started, starting back in the 1880s when they have reliable temperature records. They're able to, in effect, remap the average temperature in all of these different parts of the world and show you the flux, that is, the change of that over time. Well, this is a staggering question, and obviously poses the question, well, what does any particular religion have to say about this? Does the Episcopal Church have a different perspective, say, than the Baptist Church on this, or is it pretty much universal? Well, in fact, the data suggests it's universal. But, as I said earlier, it's our belief systems, not the data systems, that we act upon. And the belief systems are really quite variable, even though the data is uniform across all traditions. And this is something we want to look at a bit at this point, because we're in effect up against a series of events. And if we graphed out the CO2 concentrations over time, you'd see that there's, again, a worldwide representations of thousands and thousands of data points, which all scientists from all traditions accept at this point. But we're in a very different circumstance when it gets to asking the question, what is the Episcopal view of our cosmic circumstance? Well, as it turns out, you can find that out because the Episcopal Church has actually issued a pastoral message on climate change. And you can find these things on ecojustice.tv if you're interested, and find out what various churches have said about things. Here, for example, if you call up Ecojustice TV and look for a pastoral message, just type it in here, for example, and you'll get something clickable here which will take you out to their website and where you can find the pastoral message, which was dated Friday, September 19th, 2014, very recent, just a couple months ago, in effect. So there is an Episcopal pastoral message on climate change, and in many respects you can find this elsewhere too at places like the Harvard Divinity School, which just held a conference focusing on climate change efforts as moral choices. Well, again, click on this and you can go out through ecojustice.tv. Just put in the search engine up there, spiritual and sustainable, and you'll get right to the source material. Furthermore, you can hear various individuals, like Presiding Bishop Catherine Jeffords Shorey over here at the Episcopal Church, and she makes statements. Not only she alone, but whole congregations get together and make statements. Again, you can find these on EcoJustice TV and see events like this that were pulled together. Climate Revival, 2013, Trinity Church, Copley Square, Boston, 27th of April. A whole series of religious leaders, and the sermon, Lazarus, Come Out. Well, I'd urge you to look at all these things, and they're really quite informative about different religious traditions, but we still have to ask the question, what's the Episcopal view of the cosmic circumstance? And ask it, frankly, as, isn't this a bit parochial? I mean, if we're up against the kind of global changes that we've seen in those graphs and in those heat diagrams of the transformation in the last century, isn't it a bit parochial to be concerned about the, as it were, the Episcopal vantage point on that? What about other systems altogether? For example, people expressing themselves about things like pipelines. Take a look at what the Catholic sisters have done.
When you think of opposition to pipelines in America, I bet you think of something a little like this. And not like this. That's right, nuns. I'm James West from Climate Desk, reporting from Marion County, Kentucky. I'm going to introduce you to an unlikely group of rabble-rousers. These guys have become the face of a grassroots campaign against the proposed Bluegrass Pipeline.
The Bluegrass Pipeline is our opportunity.
The 1,100-mile pipeline, if built, would connect Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, with an existing pipeline all the way to the coast. The foot soldiers in this campaign, well, they're called the Sisters of Loretto.
This isn't about fighting big corporations. This is about saving our heritage. We see it as a trust.
When a pipeline representative came knocking to ask whether they could survey this land, the sisters said no.
No, not at this time or ever did we want to turn our land over for another company to come in and to survey it.
Hearing the representatives from the company talk, I mean, it's like this is going to happen. So, and if you don't want to say yes, we'll use eminent domain. I'm Sister Maria Vissi, and I have been in the Loretto community since 1955. Just have been in love with this land ever since then. You just have to understand that this goes very, very deep. This is our mother house, and so it's deep in the heart of each and every one of us.
The Sisters of Loretto have called this campus here in central Kentucky home since the early 1800s. It's 800 acres of what they call a sacred bond with their faith, a bond that they don't want to put in jeopardy with a new pipeline.
Well, you can get the idea here. Sisters of Loretto are resisting a new pipeline, and they've been resisting the XL pipeline as well. But is their tradition in sync with others around the country? Take a look at this one from another part of the American South.
Outside is frightful.
This fella comes from California.
We don't have this stuff in California. I'm going to tell you that much right now. It's good to be here this morning. I hope you've come with an open heart and a heart that's full of praise this morning. Let me give you this. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. Why don't you
Well, whatever else he's doing, he's exercising kind of religious chauvinism. It's our God, right? It's not their God. Our God is great. And sing along with me and everyone will see how great is our God. It's actually a very extraordinary service in a very extraordinary parish. In fact, you can find out more of this because they actually televise their material and telecast it as well. One of their famous sermons is actually on the theme of the myth of global warming. Take a look. The Reverend Falwell delivered it.
The myth of global warming, that statement alone will provoke 500 letters to the editor by the tree huggers and the liberals and everybody who gets upset at any challenge to the alarmism and the hysteria that's going on because of the claim that man-made global warming will bring an end to spring and summer and fall and winter, and the sea will rise to horrific levels, and the heat will melt Antarctica and the North Pole, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and we will find ourselves in a global tsunami.
Well, apparently the Reverend Falwell doesn't believe any of that, and he goes on to tell you what he does believe, which is actually very interesting. Especially in the American context here.
I'll tell you where you can get all the science you want on it. I follow this and have for years in lots of places and now on the internet. The promoters of alarmism are as expected. The United Nations, no friend of the U.S., liberal politicians, radical environmentalists, and of course liberal clergymen, Hollywood, and pseudoscientists. Now I repeat, I'm not a scientist. But in a message as complex as this, and with only 30 minutes to bring it, I want to tell you where you, and listen carefully, and have your pen and pencil ready, a pen or pencil ready. I want to tell you how you can get hundreds of pages of documents, scientific documents, the speeches of U.S. senators, people you can believe, hundreds of pages that debunk the current hysteria about global warming. Go to our website here at the church, www.trbc.org.
Now, actually, you want to do this. You may ask, what is the TRBC? It's the Thomas Road Baptist Church, right? And you can get a free download from the Thomas Road Baptist Church of this publication.
It's thomasroadbaptistchurch.org, trbc.org. And then we have on the front page, we have a link. It's entitled A Skeptic's Guide to Debunking Global Warming Alarmism.
Okay, right there on the trbc.org, you can download this, and it turns out it's hundreds of pages, but it's hundreds of pages from one senator. A very interesting senator in that it turns out that it's Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma. Okay, well, he's being promoted, and you can get a free copy from the Thomas Road Baptist Church. And as it turns out, we've already covered this problem. Elections have consequences. And Senator Inhofe is not just your average senator. He's now in line in January to take over the Senate's top environmental job. You ought to check out what he believes, and his religious tradition is outlined in a thing called The Family, a book that's been brought out about him. But in effect, his point is that God is still up there, and God's still in charge. Jesus didn't come down to take sides, according to him. Jesus came down to take over. And that's exactly what these people did in the last election. If God's still up there, that's still a bit of a problem. Where is up in a cosmic circumstance? Which way is up in space? This is not trivial. Anyone needs to find it out if you're an astronaut. What way is up in space? What do our sort of traditions of looking at up and down do in a spherical world governed by an infinite space? Well, he's very proud of telling people that the global warming movement is over and the rest of the world is being ignored, and you can tap into this again through the ecojustice.tv. Keep tabs on what our new Senate chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee, and starting in January, will start saying. He's actually starting to say it beforehand. For this reason, a lot of people have been drawing attention to the fact that the universities have got to get involved in a necessary paradigm shift, a paradigm shift away from growth towards sustainability. And this is why they're focusing on transition studies. The transition has to be made if we wish to survive as a human species. We can't infinitely grow on a finite planet. It's just not possible. And we've got to make the transition gracefully, hopefully, into the sustainability paradigm. If we don't do it gracefully, it will be done for us rather brutally as we collapse as a civilization. This is why transition studies are crucial. The prophetic cry has gone out from all faiths, all cultural traditions, and all the world's sciences. We did not create the world. We cannot control it. We must not destroy it. We now know that there is no planet B. We only have one Earth. We only get one chance. This is why many would argue it doesn't make much sense to argue back and forth between different religions in a cosmic tragedy. It doesn't matter really who gets elected unless they come to terms with this transition we're all going to have to make from an infinite growth paradigm to a sustainability paradigm. We're not well situated to do this. We're in effect calling upon something we've never been up against and never had a chance to say much about. That is, the limit of the human prospect that we may all be up against in reference to something as dramatic as the cessation of growth, the transition to sustainability. These are not trivial problems, and that's why, in a sense, transition studies are going to have to become the subject matter and the concern of all institutions, not just universities, not just school systems, but all civic organizations, all churches, all religious traditions. This isn't something you can sidestep and ignore at this point. This is something that's going to have to take over as a major and dominant form of activity for the human prospect. We just can't, in effect, exist in an infinitely heated up planet. It won't support our agriculture, the water supplies, any kind of civil interaction between people scrabbling over the last remaining resources of fossil fuels. We've got to get beyond fossil fuels. In fact, in many respects, we already are a solar-based civilization. The trouble is we're on deficit solar. We're living off solar energy from the fossilized carbon. We need to get over onto current photosynthate before it's too late. Thank you very much. See you next week.